the South by Southern Living magazine, and one of the 50 most influential Jews in America by The Forward. He published his debut cookbook, Shaya, An Odyssey of Food, My Journey Back to Israel. Part memoir and part cookbook, he shares his deeply personal journey of survival and discovery, exploring the evolution of cuisine and the transformative power and magic of food. So, with that amazing bio, we are so excited to turn it over to you, Chef Alon, to share a first recipe, an elevated matzo ball soup. And we're so excited to welcome people from all over the country. It's wonderful to see. So I turn it over to you, Alon.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you to the AJC for putting this all together and allowing us to have some sense of religious assembly, some sense of gathering, even though it's through our computer screens. There is an intimacy to it. Here we are in my home, and I get to cook in my kitchen for all of you today and talk to you about some of my favorite recipes, some of the things that really remind me of Passover, that I grew up eating during Passover, and share some inspiration with you guys. I think that these are definitely crazy times. They're scary and confusing times for so many, and having the opportunity to come together and to just have dialogue like this during such hard, emotionally draining times is really beautiful. And it's one of the silver linings, I think, in all of this, is that here we are all together making matzo ball soup. So I'm gonna start cooking, and I hope that some of you guys out there will be cooking along with me. The first thing, what's great is that we have 90 minutes together today, maybe even more than that. So I like that I get to cook everything from scratch with all of you and really talk you through the recipes and talk you through some of my favorite things about each of these recipes. So as you see, I just started with a whole chicken. We're gonna make some matzo ball soup broth really quickly. And this broth is gonna be used to cook the matzo balls and also to make our matzo ball soup with. And because we have 45 minutes, that means that I have all of this time to actually break down the chicken. What I've done so far is I've taken the back out of the chicken. This is full of all kinds of great flavor, all kinds of connective tissues, and really is something that I think really adds a lot of flavor to the broth. So I always kind of cut the back out first, and then I open up the cavity and I take out this piece of cartilage and bone from the middle so that I can cut my chicken in half right down the middle. And we all have like whole chickens around every once in a while in our refrigerators, and a whole chicken can feed a lot of people. It really can. So if you treat it the right way, you can get a lot out of it. So I've cut off the legs. I'm going to take those legs and also cut the thigh from the leg. And all of this meat is going to go into a pot, and it's going to begin to simmer until it starts to fall off the bone. And if I have my timing right today, I will be able to actually get this chicken to cook, make a great broth, make a good matzo ball soup, and show you how to get all of that done in 90 minutes. So we can say that this can be a competition for all of us to cook our Passover meal in record time. All right, so here I have a couple of extra legs and thighs. That's just to kind of like add more flavor, more meat to the broth and to the soup. But you know, just use whatever you have. If you have chicken wings, if you have like turkey necks or turkey in the refrigerator, all of that works really great. I actually really like making matzo ball soup with duck as well. So with duck, it's pretty much the same thing. You just want to you don't want to cook the breast in water until it's well done. You want to cook it till it's about medium. But for chicken, we're going to cook everything until it's falling off the bone. So I got all my chicken pieces here, my chicken back, my legs, my thighs, the breasts, the wings, and all of this is going to go into a stock pot here. I'm just going to load it all in there, and I'm going to cover it with water. Now, the key to a really great broth is you don't want too much water. You want the water to just cover the bones. That's really, really important, because when it just covers the bones, you get a lot more flavor out of it. And you know, sometimes when you make chicken broth and you put it in the refrigerator and then overnight it cools and it turns into like a chicken jelly, that's a good sign. That means that you're doing things the right way. And that means that there's all of this collagen that's come from the chicken, from the bones, from all of that interconnective tissue, and has begun to melt into the broth. And when it cools, it hardens. So that creates this natural gelatin. And that means that your broth is going to have a really like rich, kind of mouth coating texture to it. So now that I've cut my chicken, I'm going to flip my cutting board so that I have a clean cutting board to start with. And I'm going to begin with making the matzo balls. So the broth is on. I'm going to let this come up to a simmer. And once it comes up to a simmer, there's going to be all of this kind of like foamy stuff starting to come to the top. I'm going to scrape all that off, and then I'll add the rest of my seasonings. And we're going to let that cook for a while. Okay, so to make the matzo balls, here I have matzo meal. And if I'm correct, all of the recipes are on the AJC site so that you guys can kind of follow along and be able to make this with me or know what all the measurements are. But this is about 1.5 cups of matzo meal. And like matzo meal, I heard is really hard to come by these days. It's I hear a lot of the grocery stores are sold out of matzo meal. So I stole a little bit of my stash from the restaurant. We go through a lot of matzo balls there. So matzo meal, I'm going to put a little bit of onion powder, a little bit of garlic powder in there. This is what gives the matzo balls like that really good flavor. Something that like it adds a seasoning to it that everyone says, man, that matzo ball tastes really good. Like, what is it? Onion powder and garlic powder. Those are like two of my favorite secret ingredients that I keep in my kitchen, because it adds that extra tang, as we like to call it in our house, that hip tang. It gives it a little something to make you say, man, that has some really good flavor. I'm going to add some salt to this as well. And I have some schmaltz. And schmaltz is just rendered chicken fat. And I urge all of you to make sure you make your schmaltz stash a priority in your house, because it's delicious. And it goes, like whenever you're roasting chicken and you have chicken fat coming off of it, save all of those. Save all that fat, put it in the freezer, because when you start living your life with chicken fat included, you've really come a long way. And you've gotten you're gonna make a lot of friends when you combine the flavors of chicken fat with whatever else you could be possibly making. I have some eggs, 4 eggs, and I'm going to crack the eggs into a bowl. I'm going to then add my schmaltz to the eggs. You can see I've kind of kept my dry and my wet ingredients separate. So schmaltz and eggs, I'm going to give those a little bit of a stir. And the reason that I kept them separate is so that I can really get the eggs to like combine with the schmaltz, so that once I start mixing the matzo balls, there's not going to be a lot of action in the bowl. We want to really kind of, for a for a very like light, fluffy matzo ball, you don't want to move that batter around too much. You want it to be really tender. So I've combined all my dry ingredients. I'm going to combine my wet ingredients. I'm going to add those to the matzo meal, and I'm going to stir that up. And I'm going to stir it until it just comes together. Once it comes together, I don't want to stir it up too much more, because then I'm going to create toughness in the matzo balls. And we want light, fluffy matzo balls. Floaters, as we like to call them. So as you guys can see, here is the matzo batter. Once it's ready, the matzo meal, just fold it together. Now that it's together like this, I'm gonna cover it, and I'm gonna let it rest. Up to an hour is good. And what that does is it's just kind of allowing the matzo meal to just hydrate and soak up all the flavor, get all the egg and fat really soaked into the matzo meal. And
if people don't have schmaltz, what can they use instead?
Well, you can use olive oil, or you can use melted butter if keeping kosher isn't a issue for you, because you can't, mix meat and dairy. But butter would work. Extra virgin olive oil would work as well to keep them apart. Okay, great. So the matzah batter is now resting. That's matzo meal, salt, onion powder, garlic powder, and then eggs and chicken fat mixed together, and then fold it all together after that. All right, so now my broth is starting to come up to a simmer. So I have to now skim all of this foam as it rises off of the top. And if you want like a really nice clear matzo ball broth, which I really like it when my matzo ball soup is very clear but still has a lot of flavor to it, so I can really see all the vegetables, and if you want to put some chopped dill in there or some extra virgin olive oil on top. So it really kind of shows all that off, and it makes it very, very pretty. So to keep that broth really clear, we have to skim all of these impurities that are rising to the top. And that's just pretty much like coagulated blood, and that's coming out of the chicken bones and out of the meat as well. Okay. So we all have to get a close-up of what that stuff looks like. You can see all that stuff that rose to the top that I've taken off. Now that it's simmering, I'm going to go ahead and add my vegetables and my spices. I add those after the broth begins to simmer and I've scooped off all of this foam, because I don't want to be fishing around for like moving the black peppercorns and stuff out of the way while my broth is simmering. This is a recipe that I was lucky enough to grow up eating from my mother and my savta. My savta is from Bulgaria, and she was a pharmacist in Sofia and moved to Israel in 1948 and became a pharmacist in Jaffa. And she actually painted this picture, this painting above here, which is looking at Jaffa from the beach in Tel Aviv. And it's one of our prized possessions. And we only have it up here today for this demo, because I wouldn't normally keep it above the stove where I'm schmaltzing stuff up. So that way you guys can see the beautiful painting, and right after the demo, we'll take it down. Okay, so now I'm gonna add all my delicious stuff here, vegetables to the broth. I'm gonna peel some carrots. One thing that I think, like during these times of the world just being really crazy, is supporting small businesses and supporting local farmers is very, very important to do. My wife, Emily, has signed up with a CSA, and like 3 times a week, like a truckload of vegetables shows up to our house, and chickens and radishes and all kinds of great stuff, fresh breads and flowers, everything that's made here locally from our artisans. And I really cherish that time when that shows up, because I feel not only am I going to be able to cook delicious food and have some really great vegetables with the food that I'm eating, but I'm also supporting the people that are affected by the coronavirus and the economy. So I've chopped up some carrots, I've chopped up some celery. I'm going to add that to my broth. And when you make a broth and you don't put too much water in there, you've really reduced the amount of time that it has to cook for, because you're not waiting for all the water, the extra water to evaporate to bring those flavors out. You're just really using the flavors that are infusing from the chicken and the vegetables and the spices, and it's more concentrated. So just make sure that water is only barely covering. Even if there's some chicken pieces that are sticking up, it's okay. It's not a big deal. I'm going to add some black peppercorns. I'm going to add some whole allspice berries. If you don't have these, don't worry about it. It's not going to make anyone walk out of your Seder. Some star anise, which I love adding to broths. I feel like it kind of gives it that really, like this kind of warm background to the flavor. Also cloves, which do the same thing as well. So I'm gonna put like about 4 or 5 cloves in there. Cinnamon stick. And some bay leaves. And we have some fresh dill and some fresh thyme that Emily went and picked from the garden earlier. And this, I think, is really important in the broth too, because it adds a ton of flavor. Okay, so all that now is in my broth pot, and it's going to begin to simmer and really start building all those flavors. Now that we have our broth going, we'll make sure that's nice and simmering. And we have our matzo balls resting, or matzo ball batter resting. We're going to let that sit, and I'm going to begin the Harissa. And I'll just start the process for the Harissa, but then we're going to come back to the matzo balls. We're going to poach those, and then we'll go back to the Harissa, and we're going to go back and forth a little bit, because that's what cooking is all about. You got to go back and forth, and you got to multitask, which I love doing. Okay, for the Harissa, I have an onion, a very big onion. It's a big one. I'm going to cut this. Just take the peel off. I hope some of you guys are following along, and I hope that I'm not moving too quickly for you, but I'm working as slow as I can right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just dice this onion. This is as slow as I can dice an onion. You should see it when I go fast. It's close to chopping my fingers off. All right, I've got this onion diced up. I'm going to now add this to my saucepan. I like it when the onions are kind of thick in the Harissa. I feel like they add a lot of texture. And I have a saute pan here, and I'm going to add the onions to the saute pan. I'm going to go ahead and cut up some apples. Just cut the core out really quickly. Cooking for Passover is one of my favorite things to do. I think Passover and Thanksgiving are 2 of my favorite holidays to cook for, because I feel like the foods are so symbolic and they're so delicious that you can't help but like make your favorite recipes over and over again and talk to other people about the things that they're making for the holidays. It's really just something that I love, and it brings me a sense of tradition and a sense of kind of comfort. It makes me think about people that I haven't seen for a while. And I love that about holidays, especially now since the world has gone to complete shit. Excuse me. But, you know, we're making the best of it. Here we are, making matzo balls in Harissa. I'm going to dice up my apples and add those to the pan with the onions. And this is like a really delicious Harissa recipe. It's going to get even more delicious. Just watch this. I have some sparkling wine. I like to use like Moscato wine because it has this like great orangey flavor, and it's not very expensive, and you can get it at like your grocery store for like $8 a bottle or something like that. I have some rice wine vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is also another great substitute to use. And I'm gonna now take these onions, and I'm gonna take the apples and the vinegar and the wine, and I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna add some sugar to that as well. And I'm gonna go ahead and put that on the stovetop and cover it. And I'm gonna let it cook until the apples have gotten really soft and the onions have softened up, and all of those are gonna be nice and tender. And I'm going to start now with my dry ingredients here. I have some fresh, or actually I have some dried figs. So I'm going to take those and just kind of lightly chop those up a little bit. So this is like a Sephardic haroset. I know some harosets are just like wine, walnuts, and apples mixed together with a little bit of sugar. But I love the dried fruits. I love the nuts, like the different types of nuts added to it. My family is Sephardic, so we kind of bring a lot of those like old Spanish Ladino flavors to the table. So here we are. I've diced up some figs. I'm going to dice up some apricots, dried apricots.
Alon, as you're dicing up the apricots, can you tell us a bit about how your memories of family, identity, how you fuse it into your cooking?
Well, my memories serve me as my Rolodex of things that I think about, my ideas, the things that come to my mind. It's hard to kind of like bring into one sentence, because my entire life is, I feel like, been a journey of cooking and of understanding about food and understanding about cultures. And every time I cook, I kind of, every once in a while, I'll come up with this thought from a memory that I've had a long time ago. And it could be just like, I was living in Italy and I was walking down the street and I walked by this bakery and I saw this like beautiful strawberry tart, you know, and that like inspires me in some way. Where I think about my mother or my grandmother cooking and kind of what that food meant to me at that time in my life. In my cookbook, Shaya, An Odyssey in Food, My Journey Back to Israel, I share a recipe for tomato soup with rice, which is one of my all-time comfort foods. And it was the soup that I would fake being sick at home so that my savta would let me stay at home, and she would make me the soup and I wouldn't have to go to school. So I would take my meat thermometer, or my thermometer, sorry, I'm still in chef mode, my thermometer, and I would like stick it in between the things of the radiator and like let it get up to like 200 degrees. And by the time I came downstairs, it was like at a good 101. And I'd say, Safta, I'm too sick. I can't go to school today. Can I stay home? And she'd be like, okay, you have a fever, stay home. And then I'd be like, all right, well, can you make me some tomato soup with rice? And I just remember like loving the flavor of that, thinking to myself, like, this is the way that I want to spend every day, just like eating this beautiful bowl of soup. And now I use tomatoes and I use rice in lots of different recipes. And I think about that every time that I'm using tomatoes or I'm using rice. I think about that soup. I think about how those things would go together, maybe like a stewed chicken with tomatoes and rice cooked in broth, so it gets really like porridgey and delicious. Those are the kinds of things that, like, as I'm cooking, I think back to, and I try to use that as inspiration. I did forget to mention that I have some whole coriander seeds here as well. And I'm going to go ahead and add that to the broth too. So my broth is simmering. My onions and my apples are simmering in the wine and the vinegar and the sugar and softening up. I have all these beautiful dried fruits, dates, apricots, and figs. And I have some hazelnuts and some pistachios. So I'm going to take all of this dried fruit along with my hazelnuts and my pistachios, and we're going to head over to the food processor. And I love the food processor because it makes a lot of work happen very easily. And I never hesitate to use my food processor to lessen the workload when I can. So here I go. I'm going to add all those dried fruits there. I'm going to add some hazelnuts. And I'm going to add some pistachios. And I'm just going to process that very quickly. I don't want it to turn into a whole puree. I just want it to be kind of chopped up. And it's okay if there are some like whole nuts left in there or the fruit is kind of clumped up a little bit. That's not a big deal. It's all right for it to be chunky. I actually really like it chunky, but this sure does beat like chopping away a bunch of hazelnuts on your cutting board. Every time I try to chop hazelnuts, they roll off the cutting board and then I have to chase them in the living room, which I don't like to do that, especially not when I'm talking to 190 something people on live virtual Seder mode. So look at that. Here, I'm gonna have to bring this closer to the camera. I'm gonna try not to get it all over my computer keyboard as I do this, but you can see all the chopped.
Yeah.
The other day I did a cooking demo and I had something like really juicy and I brought it over here and I just like drizzled a quarter cup of like meat juice into my keyboard and that wasn't very good, but that's all chopped up. Here you can see the apples and the onions and the wine and the vinegar and the sugar have all kind of boiled and softened a little bit. It's okay for them to have a little texture. You don't want it to turn into applesauce. You want to keep it chunky and have it have some texture to it. All right, so I like also mixing this together while it's nice and hot because I feel like all the flavors really come together when I do that. So here I'm going to mix up those apples, onions, all the nuts and the dried fruit, all going to get kind of tossed together. And I'm going to season this up now. So I like to use like an apricot preserve, but you can also use an orange preserve or lemon or maybe something like a blackberry, whatever kind of jam you have in your house. I feel like it adds a good texture to the harissa. I have some cinnamon, sprinkle some of that in there, some ground allspice, some ground cardamom, which adds this like really delicious kind of like floral note to it and some honey. And that really kind of helps to bind all of those ingredients together in the harissa. I'm going to put some lemon zest in there. If you don't have a microplane at your house, order one on Amazon. Don't go to the hardware store. Order one on Amazon, and you will thank me forever, because this is one of my favorite tools in the kitchen to zest lemons or zest oranges, or also just to like grate like nutmeg or Parmigiano Reggiano cheese over things. It serves as kind of this like all-purpose tool, and it was invented by carpenters to make wood smooth, wood corners smooth. But us chefs have repurposed it. All right, orange zest and lemon zest. Then I'm going to squeeze the juice out of these as well. If anybody's ever been to Israel, you know what this is, a citrus juicer, because they use this to make the pomegranate juice on the side of the street that I love so much. We even named our, all right, we're having some technical difficulties with the juicer. I'm going to hold it down. Cool. We've named our company Pomegranate Hospitality because I find the pomegranate to be a very beautiful, symbolic fruit. And each pomegranate has 613 seeds in it. And I felt that the pomegranate resembled our team, our pomegranate team, because it was full of all these beautiful seeds that would blossom into something even greater one day. And of course, the 613 seeds are also symbolic of the number of mitzvot and commandments that only the top 10 make the news all the time. There's a lot more than 10 of them. All right, so I've squeezed the juice of the lemon and the orange. That's going to go in here as well. And now I'm going to stir it up. And that's it. That's the harissa recipe. Oh, also I'll add just a pinch of salt, because I feel like the salt really brings up a lot of the flavors and kind of helps to meld all the flavors together. And right now the harissa looks very loose and kind of like pretty juicy, but as it sits and cools, it'll tighten up. You see all that goodness? You see,
Yeah,
this
that looks
is
amazing.
the stuff I don't want in my cutting board or in my keyboard, my computer keyboard. So all that goodness, it's just all going to kind of sit together. And once it gets to about room temperature, that honey is going to stiffen back up. All of the dates are going to soak up that juice. And you're going to have this really incredible, chunky, beautiful harissa with hazelnuts and pistachios.
Alon, we're getting some great questions from the chat thread, so I want to jump in and ask you one now. And for the folks who have questions, feel free to add yours in and we'll do our best to get to them. But you were speaking about Israel and the pomegranate juice, and we're wondering, can you tell us a little bit about how you've brought a bit of Israel to New Orleans and how you've shared the story through cuisine?
Yeah, well, hey, I just saw my mom's name pop up on the screen. Hi, Mom.
Hello, hi. Wonderful to see you all.
Awesome. All right, so you can critique me if I make anything wrong.
As I said, you're a million or billion times better than I am anymore.
All right, yes, I love you. Happy Passover. All right,
I love
so
you.
I'm gonna talk about Israel. I'll start to, now that my matzo ball batter has formed, I'm gonna start to roll those out. Remember that when they cook, they're gonna like double in size. So I don't want to make them too big. All right. So, you know, Israel, I was born in Bat Yam, just south of Jaffa. And when I was 4, my family immigrated to Philadelphia, where I grew up. And I always, like, as a kid, like, you know, I was like just trying to assimilate. I was trying to fit in with everybody else. I was trying to learn English when I came to America. Uh, I watched a lot of Sesame Street, and I had like the Cookie Monster's accent for a while when I was a kid, and that really made it hard. It made it hard for me to make friends. But over time, you know, I became more and more, I think, like confident, and I've become more and more like I've embraced my Jewish and my Israeli heritage, and I feel like I do that best through food. And so I always kind of turn to food to cook and think about my childhood, think about what that means to me, and how it's shaped kind of my life as an adult. And food has always, like, throughout my life, kind of has punctuated those moments of my life and has helped me to understand who I am and where I belong and what I can contribute. So when I decided to open an Israeli restaurant in New Orleans, I was like 35 years old. And I just kind of at that point figured out that this is like, for me, it's the food that I grew up eating. It's the food that I remember from going back to Israel and eating with my Saba and my Savta. And I wanted to pay respect to that. And I wanted to really find a way to cook that reflected that history of my family and of myself. Up until that point, I was cooking mostly Italian food. I even lived in Italy for a while, and in Italy, you know, I felt like I was really learning like this country style food, this family style cooking, and it reminded me a lot of the cooking from my childhood. So eventually I was able to like come around and begin cooking Israeli food in New Orleans, and it's been going pretty well up until the coronavirus started and we had to close down. But now we're doing other things. All right, so I've rolled my matzo balls. I have some broth here that I already have going. But what you want to do is the broth that I have cooking isn't quite ready yet. But you can take that broth and split it in half. And then that half of it you'll use to cook your matzo balls, and the other half of it will go to making the actual broth for the soup. But just for the sake of time, I wanted to have some ready to go. And now that I've rolled my matzo balls, I'm going to go ahead and drop them into the broth. One big difference between a light, fluffy matzo ball and like a heavy, kind of dense matzo ball is how long it sits for after you roll it. So once I've rolled them, I want to go pretty much right into my broth. Sometimes I'll even roll them and drop them into the broth as I go along, and that will result in even a lighter, more beautiful textured matzo ball. So those are going to go into the broth at a very, very light simmer. And remember, they're going to like double in size. So going over from the top, you want to keep it so that they're very separate and are able to kind of swim around in that broth and not overcrowd each other and then end up breaking up. Okay, the matzo balls are in.
Alon, you were starting to mention before you put the matzo balls in the water just about the economic reality of the times. And we wanted to ask you, you know, we all have our favorite restaurants and chefs, and we're seeing how hard it is. What can we do in our home communities? How can we support and help our favorite restaurateurs and chefs like you?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that. It's definitely been a hard time for all of us. We have had to figure out how to readjust and how to pivot in a way that has been pretty unnatural for us. We're used to welcoming people into our dining rooms and providing hospitality through like being there with people and, you know, shaking hands and putting food in front of people. And that's all really had to change. So now we've shut down the restaurant at Saba. And Emily and I, my wife Emily and I, are there cooking for doctors and nurses every single day. We're cooking for 130 Tulane doctors and nurses daily out of Saba. And it's something that I feel is a good way for us to like give back and also to be able to do what we love, which is serve people food and make them feel good and bring comfort through food. But the restaurant is closed, and the best way to support is to buy a gift card, because that allows us to keep the lights on throughout this whole thing. So if you want to support, feel free, buy a gift card for Eat with Safta or eatwithsaba.com. And that money allows us to keep our team employed, or some of our team employed, and helps us to ensure that we'll get back to normal at some point. Thank you for that question. Okay, so my matzo balls are simmering. My broth is still simmering. That's going to be really delicious. And now I'm going to begin getting all the things for my soup together. Look at this beautiful Harissa. Even in the short amount of time, you can see how it's starting to thicken up. You see that it's less juicy. It's really chunky. That's the good
Only
stuff.
there was scratch and sniff. There's a question from Madison. Do you toast the hazelnuts and pistachios before putting them in?
Yes, always toast your hazelnuts and your pistachios first, and really brings out the flavor and gets them to like show off the most flavor that they possibly can. If you don't toast them, you tend to have like a much more muted flavor from the nuts. But if you toast them, they really come through and they're super delicious, and you get that great nuttiness to them. Okay, so moving along, I think that I hope that this cooking demo isn't taking as long as some Passover Seders do, but we're doing our best to move along and make sure you guys get a chance to see all the great stuff going on without it taking too long. So I'm going to cut some of these tomatoes. I love eating tomatoes in my matzo ball soup. They bring this like fresh acidity, this burst of flavor. It's not something that I see a lot, but as you were asking me earlier, Julia, about like how memories and experiences kind of like shape the way that I cook and think about food, tomatoes came to my mind because I love a great Italian wedding soup, which is usually like meatballs that are simmered in broth with like greens and tomatoes and beans and chives and extra virgin olive oil. So I've brought kind of some of that flavor and some of those textures to the matzo ball soup based off of my experience in Italy. And then the reason that I put nutmeg and cinnamon and clove in the broth is because I love eating Vietnamese food. And I love those kind of warm spices that you get from a great pho. So that experience in New Orleans, there's this huge, amazing Vietnamese community here that they cook such beautiful food, and they have such a strong presence here in our community. And we frequent their restaurants a lot, and I love how much that, I love pho. I could eat it when it's 100 degrees outside. I could eat a big bowl of Stevie pho and still feel really good about myself. And so that flavor of the nutmeg, those warm spice, of the cinnamon and the star anise, all those warm spices are really, to me, like reminiscent of that experience. And here I've added it to my matzo ball soup. So that's what I think, you know, people can really have fun with ingredients, have fun with experiences. Like, don't feel like you have to limit yourself to making the same thing over and over and over again. And just like get creative and try to find ways to combine flavors and experiences. It makes for a much more, I think, interesting,
Yeah.
interesting meal.
Speaking of getting creative, we have some folks who are gluten-free. So for the matzo ball soup, any tips on how you can make the matzo balls gluten-free and delicious?
You know, that's a great question. I've never made a gluten-free matzo ball, but I'd be interested to hear from some of the viewers if they ever have and what they used. I guess that there's probably a gluten-free matzo meal that exists, but I haven't seen it, and I'm not sure. But the definitely matzo balls and matzo meal is gluten. It's made with flour. But yeah, I'm interested to see that. I don't know. It's one of those things I've never seen.
We're getting some answers in the chat. Gabby is recommending there's a gluten-free box mix that folks can pick up in the stores, but it's a bit sticky. So feel free, others can chime in. There is also a question, could you remind us the tool that you use to zest, what it's called?
The microplane.
Microplane?
Yeah. It's this handy. I mean, it's available in pretty much every,
Cool.
like Williams Sonoma or on Amazon. But this one here I love because it has like a coarse and a fine attachment or a grate to it. So if you want like a more coarser grate, I like using the coarser grate because I like the kind of like texture that you get from the zest. But it's the coarser one's also really good for cheese, like if you're shaving cheese on your salad. But I also like to grate garlic and ginger on this as well. It's kind of like a garlic press in the sense you just have to kind of easily shave it over the top and it just shreds into whatever you're making. So my broth is, you know, I guess we've been cooking now for about an hour and my broth is super delicious. It's like really good. It has all of this richness to it. It's again important that I didn't add too much water. So I just added some salt to it. I'm gonna season it up with salt. And I'm gonna see, here I'm gonna take my chicken breasts because those cook faster than legs. So now that those are just kind of cooked through, those can come out. And the legs and the wings can keep simmering a little bit more until they start to become a little bit more tender. I'm just going to let that sit there for a second to cool off. My matzo balls, they're floating away. Sorry that I can't bring my computer closer for you guys to see, but I'll do my best to show you what they currently look like. Nothing says Passover like a steamy matzo ball.
That looks amazing. And we have a few folks who are cooking along with us. Jennifer is having a blast. And if you want to show us the matzo balls that you've made, if you've gotten to that point, we'd love that. And anybody else, I know I saw Natalie on here earlier and she cooked with me last week, borscht. So this is great to see some of the cooks following along and loving what you're sharing with us.
Yeah. You know what I made the other day, which was a lot of fun in the spirit of Passover, was I made a Seder plate salad, which I thought was really cool. It was all the different ingredients from the Seder plate, all the different symbolic foods from the Seder plate combined into a salad. So the bitter herbs were the green leaf lettuce that I used, which has like this like natural bitterness to it. I braised some lamb shanks just in broth for about an hour and a half till they started to fall off the bone. I toasted some walnuts. I sliced some apples. I made a horseradish vinaigrette, and I soft poached some eggs. and I added parsley to the vinaigrette. So I had this great vinaigrette of parsley, whole grain mustard, prepared horseradish, extra virgin olive oil, and lemon juice. And I added some salt to that. And then the Harissa are the sliced apples and the toasted walnuts. And then I just built my salad. I dressed all the greens in that horseradish vinaigrette with a bunch of chopped parsley. I topped it with sliced apples, toasted walnuts, and soft cooked egg right over the top of the salad. And I had my whole Seder plate right there in one edible bowl. It was delicious.
Wow. That is so creative.
That's the kind of stuff that I think is like really fun to do. So just kind of think outside of the box a little bit and have fun. Like, you know, the holidays, they don't always have to, it doesn't always have to be exactly the same food. I think people really like to mix it up a little bit. Though, of course, there's the recipe that everybody talks about. You want to make sure you don't like miss out on doing something that people really love. But I think it's also okay to just like have some fun with it, be creative, and really enjoy the creative process of thinking about the food, and how that food then becomes symbolic to your Passover Seder. Okay, so the chicken breast is just perfectly cooked. I have some chives here, or scallions, that I've cut up. I have my tomatoes, and I have some arugula here, which also again is like a like that whole Italian wedding soup where you put greens or lettuce in the soup. Here we have arugula, but you can use any type of green. And my broth, let me taste it.
There's a lot of fans of the Seder plate salad concept in this chat thread, Alon, and we're wondering, how do you decide what gets on the menu at your restaurants after you've experimented with creative ideas like this? Like, would something like that ever make it? Or what's the process, if you could share with us?
You know, the menu is its own kind of like living, breathing organism. It's something that you have to communicate with, have conversations with, respect, understand that it's going to have good days and bad days, and really just like build a personal relationship with your menu. Because when I have an idea, I can't just put it on the menu because the paper is only so big and the printer can only handle so much writing on one piece of paper. And then you have other dishes that people really love that if you took off, they would be outside of your restaurant with, you know, flames and protesting. So there's always that delicate balance. One thing that we do at both Saba and Safta when the world isn't quarantined is we do our Eat with Saba and our Eat with Safta menu, which is constantly rotating. It's kind of like a really great family style menu. People come together and we just put out a whole bunch of food and people can share and kind of pass it around. And that menu allows us to really tap into those crazy ideas that just like pop into our heads every once in a while. While the full menu kind of rotates more seasonally, and every month or so, one vegetable will come into season and we'll be featuring that, and another one will go out and we'll remove that from the menu. But we have items on our menu, like at Saba, Harissa roasted chicken, that people go crazy for. If we ever took that off the menu, there would be like a coup. It would be a bad situation. So we have to keep it on, and I love that because I love knowing that people can come and kind of get that great dish that they crave and that they want at any time that they want. If like some of my favorite restaurants took my favorite dishes off of their menu, I'd be upset too. So I understand, and it's always kind of playing that balance. All right, so my broth is beautiful and clear. I'm going to put that here into my bowl. It doesn't take much to get this really delicious, flavorful broth. I'm gonna add my tomatoes. I'm gonna add chicken meat back into it. And once the legs and wings start to become more tender, I can pick all that meat off as well and add that to the soup as well. I have my matzo balls, which are now ready. I'll put a couple of those in there. Some of this beautiful arugula that I'll just kind of tear up and add to the broth. Stir all that together in there. And I like it when that arugula, like, I don't want the vegetables to be really cooked much. I want them to still have a lot of their texture and flavor to them, because I think that adds a really nice balance to the soup. I'm going to put some extra virgin olive oil in there. And some of these scallions that I have cut up on top. And here is our matzo ball soup.
Wow.
Where I definitely don't want the broth in the keyboard. Matzo ball soup with arugula, tomatoes, scallions, and a really delicious broth with warm spices. And the extra virgin olive oil in there. All right, so let's bring our taste tester in. My beautiful wife, Emily.
Hey everyone.
There she is.
Oops, you're gonna spill the soup.
I'm spilling the soup. Okay. You're always distracting me. All right, so here, I'll put it right here, and you can taste it and see what you think.
Very delicious.
Are you just saying that because there's hundreds of people watching?
No, it's because your mom's on there. It's delicious.
And that's it. In 90 minutes, we've created a great matzo ball soup. This is our dog Chechi, who's one of the official taste testers.
She likes chicken.
She loves the chicken, as you can see. She loves these videos because she gets all kinds of treats. But the other day I made buttermilk biscuits and she spit it out. She didn't like it.
Do you have a favorite food? I mean, you cook so many amazing foods and you've tasted foods from around the world, but if you could pick one that's your favorite.
My favorite food? Gosh. I'd have to say Emily's red beans, because she just whispered it to me. My wife Emily is the bean queen of New Orleans and has won competitions, has just decimated the competition for red bean cooking in New Orleans, and has bring your legume d'or into the frame. Her legume d'or, her golden bean. This is the trophy that she won when she beat out 31 chefs and restaurants in New Orleans for the best red beans
This
and rice.
is about your matzo ball soup, which is also award-winning.
But my wife's red beans, every Monday she makes a big pot of red beans, and I come home on Monday and the house smells like red beans, and it makes me feel like I'm home and like the world's gonna be okay. And even in the midst of this crazy crisis that we're in the middle of, like she makes her red beans on Monday and everything kind of feels a little bit normal again, which is nice.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. It's good to lean into those routine nostalgia things during this crazy time. Well, yeah. Thank you. This has been absolutely amazing. Your mom wants to know if you can deliver. And many other people have added great feedback in the chat thread. I'm going to toss it back to a member of the American Jewish Committee staff, Alex, to wrap us up, but really want to thank you. This has been an honor to learn from you and all of us who have been participating virtually are just so excited to celebrate Passover this year, thanks to you making it extra special.
Thank you. So great to be with all of you guys.
Thank you so much, Julia. Really amazing job, and thank you so much for representing Access so well. And thank all of you for joining us, and a massive thank you to Alon and Emily, of course. We're thinking of you, your family, and the rest of the restaurant community, and we encourage all of you guys to support Saba and Safta, Alon's amazing restaurants. I can personally say that they are amazing, and I know this isn't kosher for Passover, but if you haven't had his pita, you're really missing out. Also, if you guys are interested in supporting the local restaurant communities of Denver and New Orleans, the Red Bean Crew and the Lee Initiative are both offering relief. And if you're interested in supporting them, we'll send that information right after the call. So I'm Alex Rubin, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm the Assistant Director of Development for Access Global and a proud New Orleans Saints fan, so this is really, really fun for me. Who dat? We recognize that in these uncertain times, many are looking for a community to connect with, and Access is here to be that community and offer a source of refuge, reflection, and above all, a pathway to pursue global Jewish advocacy. So we hope to see you on the next remote access program. Please follow us on Instagram if y'all don't already, at ajc.global. Follow us on Facebook. You can find all of the recordings for all of our programmings on our website, so you can follow what's coming. And on behalf of all of AJC, we wish all of you and your loved ones a happy, restorative, healthy, and meaningful Passover. And with that, thank you again, Alon, and I hope everybody has a great night.
Happy Passover, everybody.
Thank you so much, Alon and Emily. We really look forward to visiting New Orleans and Denver when this is over and experiencing your incredible food.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone that tuned in today. It really means the world to us that we got a chance to have some community, some semblance of fellow matzo ball soup lovers out there, and this was a great bright spot in our week. So thank you.
Thank you. Us as well. We'll be following up with the recipes in case for some reason folks didn't get them on the first go around, as well as links to Alon's cookbook, which is really, really, really incredible. So if you're interested in more of this kind of food, you can certainly make that all year round with Alon's amazing cuisine. So thank you, everyone. Wishing you an amazing Pesach, and we look forward to seeing you on our next remote access program. Thank you, everybody. Be well and take care. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.